After 6 long years undercover beside a mafia boss, I was finally approaching the end of my mission. The sting operation was about to close in when my superiors dropped a bombshell. Operation suspended. Edward is connected to bigger fish. We need to wait. I looked down silently at the man, who had just sliced up his second-in-command, because of my subtle manipulation. He walked over and slipped his arm around my waist. "Baby, don't be upset," he cooed. "I always knew that guy was trouble. Give me a smile, and I'd give my life for you." "Captain, we can't wait any longer." I hissed into my burner phone later in an abandoned building. "If we wait much longer, I'll end up becoming the boss myself. Why won't you close the net?" "Captain, do you have any idea what these 6 years have been like for me?" In that crumbling shell of a building, I stared down the man squatting across from me. He scratched his head and offered me a cigarette. "Look, Mary, it's not that we don't want to move." I shot him a death glare, and he finally caved. "Edward is connected to something much bigger. You're our only inside source." It was always the same story. Behind every criminal was an even bigger criminal. While I kept struggling in this sunless hell, my phone rang. My captain watched in amazement as my voice instantly transformed from hard-edged to sugary sweet. "Hey Eddie, what's up? I'm not wandering around. Just getting my nails done." Okay, I'll head back right away. "Don't be mad, baby." I hung up, stood, and crushed my cigarette under my heel. I fixed my gaze on the man still squatting on the ground with his mouth half open. "Promise me this is the final mission. Success or failure, you have to bring me home after this. It's been 6 years, and I really want to go home. Don't lie to me again." Yeah, in private I smoke and drink, but around Edward, I had to be this innocent, unworldly girl. But when I opened the door to his villa and saw blood everywhere, I felt like all my pretenses were about to come crashing down. "Baby," the man standing in the middle of all that blood was casually cleaning his knuckles. "This one and this one," he said, kicking at 2 unrecognizable shapes on the floor. "They were spreading rumors that you're an undercover cop." He calmly walked over to me, using fingers still wet with blood to ruffle my hair. "I couldn't let anyone slander my baby by calling you a cop, so I took care of them." His warm fingertip traced my cheek, and I shuddered. He crouched down, held my hand, and looked up at me. "You must be upset about being falsely accused, right? How could you possibly be a cop? Those idiots didn't think it through. Don't worry, I've handled it for you." I looked down at him, forcing a smile while cold sweat soaked the back of my shirt. I had only one thought. Thank God Edward's blinded by love. "I'm out after this job," I whispered into my phone, hiding on the balcony. "This isn't a life anyone should live, Captain." All right. I hear you. We've already booked your flight. Once we catch Edward and his contact during this deal, your mission is complete. Neither Edward nor his contact will escape." Tony, my captain, was making promises again, but I'd heard too many of his empty words before. "You'd better not be lying this time. Edward killed 2 more people in front of me today. I don't even know if he's mentally stable anymore. Gotta go. Don't blow your cover." All I heard after that was the dial tone. I sighed, broke the SIM card, and tossed it into the bushes below. I had barely finished when someone embraced me from behind. "Did I scare you today?" The man's skin carried a faint orange blossom scent. Edward knew I liked that fragrance. I hugged his waist, pressing my ear against his chest, disappointed to hear his heart beating strongly. "I'm fine. But how will you explain killing Tiger to your crew?" He tilted my chin up, his dark eyes examining me for a long moment before asking with a light chuckle, "Would you rather I killed you instead?" Edward was a complete psychopath. I knew that. He backed me against the balcony railing. The night breeze was gentle, and his kiss was equally tender. As if his hands had never been stained with countless lives. As if he wasn't the young criminal that gave police the biggest headache. Until I felt the barrel of his gun slowly tracing up my spine. What the crew thinks doesn't matter. In my world, you being an undercover cop isn't even a possibility. His cold fingers caressed my cheek. "If you were, I'd make sure you weren't. Understand?" How would he make sure? A corpse would never betray him. It would always remain loyal. I lowered my eyes, unsure how to react. He then laughed, hugging my waist and kissing me. "Come on, did I scare you? I've dealt with those 2 guys. Not satisfied? Silly girl, how could I ever suspect you?" Despite it being November, the city was still sweltering. I walked with my hands in my pockets, following Edward. His contact for this deal was infamous in the underworld. They called him Mule Knife. Based on the intelligence I'd passed along, the police should have already positioned themselves at the meeting location. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. Edward never hid my presence at these meetings. Everyone knew he adored me, and that I was his untouchable weak spot. "I've heard Miss Sally particularly loves turquoise," Mule Knife said, pulling out a necklace with a 3-centimeter high-grade blue turquoise pendant. Even Edward's contacts had to curry favor with me. I absent-mindedly examined the jewelry, while my heart raced. I couldn't stop thinking. I'm finally going home. Finally stepping out of the shadows. Finally returning to my country's embrace. I couldn't even imagine how badass I'd look pointing my gun at Edward's head and telling him I was a cop. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Both Edward and Mule Knife frowned. As the door was kicked open, I quickly drew my gun and pressed it against the temple of the man beside me. I'm sorry, but Before I could finish, my hidden earpiece crackled with the captain's message. Operation aborted, Sally. We can't take this guy in. Well, isn't that great? My team just canceled an arrest order. Police! I shouted, swinging my gun just past Edward's head and firing at the door. Everything erupted into chaos. The foreign police officers who burst in weren't actually prepared to make arrests. They were just putting on a show. In fact, they were outgunned by Edward and Mule Knife's men. Sally, your primary mission now is to protect Edward. He's a key witness. We can't lose our connection through you. That was the final order that came through my earpiece. Edward grabbed me and we ran. The cops were lenient with Mule Knife's men, but used real bullets on Edward. As bullets whizzed past, I stumbled in my high heels. I expected to feel a bullet tear through my calf. But instead, I heard a muffled grunt beside me. Keep moving, Edward said through gritted teeth, pulling me along. But I stood frozen. Move, he shouted, his voice nearly breaking. Through the chaos, I looked back and saw my captain aiming his gun at me. I admit, for a moment, I thought about giving up this damn undercover job. I really wanted to go home. 6 years without setting foot in my homeland. If I took this step, if I completely blew my cover, I wouldn't be undercover anymore. The captain would have to take me home. But in that moment of hesitation, the captain didn't hesitate at all. He fired straight at me. In the split second that followed, Edward pulled me aside and took the bullet himself. Blood immediately gushed from his abdomen. Despite this, as he frantically pulled me away, he never let go of my hand. I stared into the dark stairwell ahead, feeling like a beast with blood-filled jaws was waiting to devour me. The blood-soaked future stretched endlessly ahead with no end in sight. I'm sorry, Eddie. I didn't know. Slap. A sharp sound cut through the air as my face was struck. It was Jasmine, Edward's adopted sister, and the daughter of a local warlord. My brother got seriously wounded because of you, you ungrateful bitch, she hissed, yanking my hair until my scalp burned. I didn't dare say a word in my defense. From the corner of my eye, I could see Edward sitting in the back seat, tending to his wound without even glancing at me. In the past, if anyone had dared to lay a finger on me, he'd have ended them right there. I know I messed up, I whimpered, keeping my head down. I was just so scared. Eddie, please talk to me. I was terrified. I had no choice but to return to this role, desperately fighting for survival space. I still had a mission to complete. Playing weak and pouty had always been my go-to strategy with him. He always softened for me. But this time, after bandaging his wound, he finally looked up at me. He cocked his gun, released the safety, and pressed it against my forehead. I just heard you say you're a cop. Explain yourself, Miss Sally. My hands and feet were bound. My vision plunged into darkness. What would these people do to traitors? Cut off their limbs? Torture them? Throw them into sewers to feed the rats? In that moment, I mentally ran through my funeral arrangements 2 or 3 times. None of them left me in one piece. Then the blindfold was suddenly removed. A bright light dangled overhead. I looked up at the man wearing protective goggles, probably to keep blood from splattering on his face. He gripped my chin, lifting my head. Do you know what punishment awaits you? I stared at him in silence. The man before me was a psychopath. And what happens to those who betray psychopaths? The torture instruments lining the dark corners seemed to answer that question. He played with my chin leisurely before flashing me a smile. He was genuinely handsome, with eyes that concealed an ocean of blue. If you didn't know better, you might think he was one of the good guys. He set up his phone on a stand, aiming the camera at us. How would he do it? Slice me horizontally, vertically, diagonally? My imagination ran wild. But just when I thought the blade would fall, he removed his goggles and gently placed them on my head. Through the transparent shield, I watched him clearly in the light. I felt his fingers caress my face, his delicate eyelashes casting fragmented shadows as he blinked. Baby, I told you. In my world, betraying me isn't an option. He raised the blade, but the expected pain never came. Instead, blood splattered across my goggles in the next second. My pupils contracted sharply as adrenaline surged. What was he doing? He had locked his own 5 fingers in the restraint and brought down a clean cut. This was the punishment meant for traitors, meant for me. Edward couldn't bear to hurt you. But rules are rules, Miss Sally. The punishment for your mistake must be served by Edward himself. The goggles were covered in blood. I couldn't see anything. When my vision cleared, I was looking into his bloodless face. The metallic smell invaded my nostrils. I heard Jasmine's voice. This is only because of Edward. He guaranteed with his own life. He loves you that much, you worthless bitch, Miss Sally. Edward couldn't hold himself up anymore. The next second, he collapsed onto my lap. There was blood everywhere. I stared at his severed fingers on the floor, until he let out a weak laugh. Why are you crying? They can be reattached. Medical personnel in white burst into the room, collecting his fingers and lifting him onto a stretcher. Before they took him away, I heard his soft sigh. Stand by my side, baby. Please forget your past life. I couldn't fucking take it anymore. I was locked in this room. Edward's room. Everything here belonged to him. I remembered when he first picked me up. I was standing in a line of young women wearing tattered clothes, being inspected like cattle. He never even looked at me at first. I was the one who pursued him step by step. I needed to extract information. Before coming here, I had studied how to become his lover. And then he fell in love with me. Who's this hunger strike for? Rain pounded against the window curtains. The man with bandaged hands leaned against the doorframe, watching me. I hugged my knees, staring at the raindrops hitting the glass until he walked to the bed and pushed me down onto the mattress. Do I look like I'm in the mood to coax you? His fingers gripped my chin, but I still refused to look at him. Angry, he forced my head to turn. Do I need to feed you? I took a breath as he grabbed a bowl of porridge nearby, took a mouthful, and forced it into my mouth. I felt his body burning against mine, making it hard to breathe. Baby, what's going on in that head of yours? He fed me half the bowl, then stopped gripping my throat. What are you thinking about? He growled. I stared at his features, always so beautiful, deep and mesmerizing. These past few days, I'd realized something that could make me unbeatable. If you're thinking about someone else, I'll never let you go, he threatened. His threat felt like a losing hand. I looked up and casually interrupted him. I was wondering if your hand is healing, Edward. See how quickly he crumbled. I held his fingers. The severed digits had been reattached, but each knuckle bore horrific scars. They probably wouldn't be as nimble as before. As the howling wind swept into the room, I realized he was wearing only a thin shirt. Edward, did the person behind you punish you? I asked softly. He leaned on my shoulder, seemingly tired, with dark circles under his eyes. Yeah, lost a few teams, that's all. Do you regret it? He chuckled softly, sitting up straight. Storm clouds gathered, like the fog in his eyes. Regret what? Meeting you? I regret it like hell. But what can I do? Could I bring myself to kill you? Tell me how. I was locked in Edward's room with no way to contact the outside world. So every night he squeezed into bed with me. Sometimes his fingers gripped my throat like he wanted to kill me. Other times he gently held my waist, passionately intimate. He kept such a close eye on everything I could touch that I couldn't find any birth control. Meanwhile, I was certain he was taking large doses of antipsychotic medication. He was genuinely mentally ill. I didn't know what Edward had done to protect me, but I knew he might have been demoted to a desk job. They had many of our countrymen who had been tricked into joining. I watched him typing on his computer for a while before asking softly, "Could you let me walk around the backyard? It's suffocating being in your room all day." The man had his back to me for a long time with no response. "Edward," I called. I heard him laugh softly. "What for?" "To test if your homemade communication device works." My eyes widened. I had indeed been trying to build some communication equipment from whatever I could find in the room. I needed to contact my captain, but I'd only worked on those devices in the bathroom. "Edward, you creep. You put cameras in the bathroom." He raised an eyebrow without confirming or denying, then smashed the device I'd hidden behind a picture frame onto the floor. He pinned me against the wall by my throat. "I told you not to leave, not to leave. Why don't you ever listen?" His rage erupted so suddenly that I struggled, frantically scratching at his hand with bulging veins. I managed to choke out, "It's not a communication device. It was a birthday gift for you." "As if. You smashed it anyway, so you'll never know what it was." The moment I said those words, his grip loosened. I hadn't expected him to crouch down and begin picking up the broken pieces one by one. It was a little robot," I explained, following through with the lie. But he picked up that thing like a treasure, wiped the dust off with his sleeve, and tucked it into his pocket. When he suddenly embraced me, I could still smell that faint orange blossom scent. "I'm sorry, baby. I was wrong. I misunderstood you. Please don't hate me. I lost my temper. I'm sick, please don't hate me, okay?" His tall nose pressed against the hollow of my neck. His emotions came too quickly. I suspected he hadn't taken his medication today. I could only reach out to stroke his soft hair. His knuckles traced lightly along my spine as he repeatedly whispered one phrase. "Don't hate me, baby." I stared at his reddened eyes reflected in the mottled glass, thinking, "You believe everything I say. If I don't deceive you, who else would I trick? I gradually earned the right to go out. It was simple. In the swaying shadows of the night, he would hold me in his arms possessively. If I called him husband, he'd go crazy and agree to anything I asked. Edward's birthday was in a week. He'd been acting strange lately, often sitting alone in the living room, lost in thought. One night he burst into my room grabbing my shoulders. It's wrong, everything's wrong. I made a mistake. I'm running out of time. I didn't understand why he was so sad. He hugged me tightly, and after a while I realized his body was instinctively begging me for help. The next day, he acted like nothing had happened, kissing the corner of my mouth and saying good morning. I suspected his mental illness was getting worse, but it didn't matter. I'd already made contact with the captain. In the future, our meetings would be in a police interrogation room. I keep having the same dream lately, he said, holding me close and playing with my fingers. What dream? He didn't answer my question, just smiled as scattered kisses fell on my earlobe as he whispered. Baby, do you think we'll have children? We won't have children. And if we did, I would do anything to get rid of it. These words I could never say to Edward. My urgent task was to appease him, and my silence was taken as consent. His kisses were delicate as he led me to the dance floor, as if I were some precious jewel. But I understood, he was just a ruthless madman. His love was like a deeply blooming flower, but I would kick him straight into the 18th level of hell. On Edward's birthday, he invited many local bigwigs. It was a mixed crowd. I thought he would bring me to entertain the guests, but instead, he pulled me to the forest behind the hotel. Jasmine and the others can handle everything else. I just want to be with you. A beautiful helicopter stood in front of me. On a date, he said, bowing to me like a high society gentleman. If his hands weren't stained with blood, I would have believed it. You can fly a helicopter too? Sitting in the helicopter wearing headphones, I heard the rotor blades whirring overhead. Yeah, learned a bit from Jasmine's dad. Just a bit. He laughed, his voice coming through the headphones like he was teasing a girlfriend. What, scared? Don't worry, I couldn't bear to let you die. The forest trails receded below us, the hotel's bright lights like scattered sparks. The empty sky was so beautiful, but I wasn't in the mood to appreciate the scenery. Baby, remember when you first met me? You leaned on my leg and said you wanted to ride in my helicopter. You were always clinging to me back then, because back then I was always figuring out how to seduce you. Once I seduced you, I knew I'd be dead. I stared at the endless forest, silently replying to him in my mind. The night wind howled. This truly was a private date time for just the two of us. Words spoken here would never be heard by anyone else. Have you ever loved me? He asked softly in the night sky. Under the vast, magnificent starry sky, I looked at him. He really did have a bewitching face that made people think he was a good, upright person. I have, I smiled. Why ask if I've loved you? You should ask if I love you now. Do you love me now? Of course I do. I swung my legs casually, though in my heart I was thinking, as if. He smiled like an idiot. Only idiots are easy to fool. I should be grateful that when it comes to love, this man is an idiot. Then you'll never lie to me, right? You'll never betray me, right? Baby, please never leave me, okay? Okay. Then he mouthed something I couldn't hear, because a bright light shone from behind him, burning his pupils. The helicopter's blades became entangled, so I never got the chance to hear him clearly. The aircraft shook and we fell together. I didn't feel any pain. After a moment, I realized he was cradling me in his arms, groaning in pain. Flashlight beams came toward us, and I saw blood spilling from his wounds. I might have broken several of his ribs, but despite the pain, he still wouldn't let go of the arms protecting me. Not until people in police uniforms surrounded him with guns. I heard his voice, hoarse and trembling, as he gripped my wrist tightly. Baby, you promised. You said you wouldn't lie to me. I broke free from his embrace, flipped him over, and pinned his wrists. I'm a police officer. This isn't lying, it's an arrest. How could I possibly have your child? That's disgusting. This international manhunt case that had lasted 6 years was finally over. When I returned home, it felt like another lifetime. Not just Edward, but his entire network and a series of criminal connections in the country were all caught at once. Meanwhile, Jasmine and the powers behind him were detained by the local government. The next day, when the bright sunshine came through the office window after so long, I had a moment where I couldn't quite get my bearings. After Edward's interrogation, you can take a step back. You'll get a medal for your service, a promotion, an office job. The captain chatted casually beside me, blowing on his tea. Edward was still in a coma, multiple fractures in his thighs, broken ribs that had punctured his lungs. I was in the hospital for 3 days before bouncing back. If he hadn't tried to save me, honestly, he wouldn't be in such bad shape. Delaying the interrogation. I didn't have much to do these days. The city had changed considerably in 6 years, though the captain had kept my staff dormitory clean every month. Walking through the bustling streets, none of the once familiar shops remained. I bought some flowers for the cemetery, placing them on several new tombstones. These were my classmates from back in the day, girls who used to chat noisily after class and drag me out for ice cream. Now they were just square photographs looking out at me from gray stones. 6 years. I felt forgotten by time, with too many memories invading my mind. I didn't tell the captain that these past few days, my dreams were filled with Edward's dazzling white light, splattered blood, and that sentence he said to me that day. I watched his lips move, but couldn't hear what he was saying. In my dreams, amid the silence, his eyes were sad and helpless, and I seemed to howl and cry for a long time. Did you forget our report formatting? Line spacing 1.5. First line indented 2 characters. Page margins 2.54 centimeters on all sides. A young intern policeman leaned over to remind me quietly. I snapped out of my daze and hurried to make the corrections. Yeah, I'd forgotten even these basics. But halfway through, I suddenly froze. The cursor blinked in my vision, and my mind went blank for a moment. My memory is usually very good. Hadn't I seen this exact formatting somewhere before? I stood up abruptly, startling everyone. No, it couldn't be. Was it just a coincidence? I had only glimpsed it briefly back then. Maybe he just happened to use a similar format when editing wanted posters. My mind was in chaos. I kept telling myself not to overthink impossible scenarios, but I still turned sharply to ask a colleague. Who can access the files of undercover police officers in our department? The department rarely assigns undercover work now. You were the last undercover to return from that batch, and information that confidential would require at least captain-level clearance to view. I stared into the person's eyes, pressing further. What about the bureau chief? Surely the chief has access. You just got back, so maybe no one told you yet. Our old chief died 3 years ago in a major explosion case. Which meant that of all the people who knew the list of undercover officers from 6 years ago, only my captain, the one who always seemed half competent, remained. I rushed to the hospital. Edward, still unconscious, would be under heavy surveillance at the downtown medical center. I charged through without much resistance, but the guard at his hospital room door wouldn't let me in. Move aside, I'm a police officer. I need to question him. Even after flashing my badge repeatedly, the guy wouldn't budge. Had Edward woken up yet? He shouldn't still be unconscious after so long. While I was pacing anxiously, a laid-back voice came from behind me. Mary, what are you doing? You're a cop too. You should know better than to obstruct official business. I stared at the man in the blue shirt smiling at me. Everything I knew about being a cop I'd learned from him. Sunlight from the hospital skylight sliced across his face, creating a stark dividing line. I took a breath and said softly, Captain, I need to ask you something. Edward has mental issues. Was he born that way, or was he driven insane? How could someone who grew up overseas instinctively use our domestic official document formatting standards? There were several nights when he grabbed my shoulder saying he was wrong. What was he wrong about? And what was he trying to tell me at the end? Mary, you're exhausted. Perhaps I should schedule you an appointment with the department psychologist. In the hospital hallway, the man tilted his head back and lit a cigarette. In that hazy smoke, I glimpsed something monstrous lurking in the depths. Captain, let me tell you a story. I stared intently into his eyes. He raised an eyebrow and crushed his cigarette against the corridor railing. Once there was a member of a mafia organization. Let's call him A. He was planted as a spy in a police department back home. He worked diligently, trying to be a good cop, and unexpectedly gained respect. He rose through the ranks and eventually became a police captain, gaining access to the list of undercover officers. That's where he discovered B. B was working undercover for the police, and had risen quickly within the criminal organization. A realized his true identity would soon be discovered. He had grown accustomed to being respected as a good cop, and couldn't accept being exposed. Coincidentally, the old police chief who had personally selected the undercover officers died in an explosion. So A made a decision. He deleted all of B's undercover files. These files were classified, and couldn't be recovered. A continued being a captain with a clear conscience, while B struggled in a hellish underworld. B received no response from the organization. He was forced to get his hands bloody. His mental health deteriorated. He went crazy. Finally, one day, he couldn't take it anymore, and forgot his identity as a police officer. Seeing him forget everything, becoming like a wild dog rolling in blood. That must have made you happy, right, Captain? The afternoon breeze carried warm light and howled around us. We stared at each other for a good 20 seconds, dust swirling between us, until he laughed. Such a storyteller. Planning to become a novelist after quitting the force. His reaction was exactly what I expected. I walked up beside him and whispered in his ear. That operation. Why did you tell me to pause halfway through? Did you make a deal with Donkey Knife? I didn't expect him to suddenly grab me by the throat and pin me against the railing. I coughed, feeling his thumb pressing harder. Mary Jones, I trained you. Don't think you can defy me. You're really annoying me. You know everything requires evidence, right? Like a ferocious beast with its bloody jaws exposed, his false mask was suddenly ripped away. Evidence? What if I told you I have evidence? I looked him directly in the eyes, emphasizing each word. He released me in the next second and straightened his tie. Fine. I'll set up that appointment with the psychologist. Go home for a few days. Stay off duty. Autumn rain soaked the path home. I had no idea where Edward was. With the captain's resources, he might already have met with an accident. I couldn't help thinking about those final days. Had Edward already remembered much? What was he trying to tell me at the end? If I'd heard him out, would things be different now? Edward, who are you really? Should I trust my own judgment? My mind was crowded with tangled thoughts, threatening to explode my head. But when I unlocked my long-abandoned apartment door, alarm bells went off in my mind. No joke, after years undercover, I wouldn't have survived without some counter-surveillance instincts. The lock had been tampered with, and the slippers in the entryway were out of place. My first reaction was to turn and run, but before I could, someone from behind strangled me with a rope. Going for the kill. I kicked over the shoe rack and grabbed a shoehorn, smacking my attacker in the face. I heard a groan beside me, but before I could break free, another person grabbed my head and smashed it against the wall. As my vision adjusted to the darkness, how many people were hiding in my apartment? They were determined to kill me. I turned and ran for the door, with them in hot pursuit. They all wore masks and carried weapons. I'd excelled in combat at the police academy, but while I could handle 1 or 2 attackers, I was no match for 4. Someone grabbed me by the throat and pushed me against the windowsill. I looked down at the shadowy trees below, the streetlights flickering. From 11 floors up, a fall would leave nothing but broken bones. The truth was, I had no evidence that the captain was corrupt, but my bluff had triggered his full defensive mode. Just how scared was he? Just as I was about to be pushed out the window, I heard the crackle of electricity behind me. In the boundless darkness, I locked eyes with a man in a black hoodie. After several days, he looked even more pale than before, like he could be shattered with a touch. Several men lay groaning at his feet. Edward, I called to him. Your abdomen is bleeding badly. Before I could finish, he turned and walked away. Wait, I stumbled after him, but he moved faster and faster. It turned into another chase, as we weaved through the stairwells of the old apartment complex. The howls of stray dogs split the moonlight. A dull pain spread through my stomach. Clutching my abdomen, I followed him. He was easier to track than the men in black, because he left drops of blood in his wake. I chased him to the parking lot, which was packed with cars at night. We weaved between old vehicles. I raised my gun. Edward, running isn't the answer. You should come back with me to the station. I believe the department won't wrong a good person. Something pressed against my waist. Through the car window reflection, I saw him standing behind me. Baby, I'm a cop. I'm a police officer, you know? You probably think I've gone crazy, but I'm a cop. His voice was hoarse, filled with invisible panic and chaos. What have I done? Baby, what should I do? Baby, no one will believe me. I can't prove I'm a police officer anymore. I've done so many terrible things. It's not your fault. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't open my mouth. In that moment, I understood. I was doubting too. With no evidence, the last record deleted, nobody had proof. He looked into my eyes helplessly. He broke down and turned to leave. Don't run. I chased after him. The lamplight stretched our shadows long, broken and wavering. No matter what, I had to bring him back, so I had to take forceful measures. When I caught up to him, I threw a punch and we wrestled on the ground. Even now, he instinctively protected me from being cut by glass shards on the ground. Another sharp pain shot through my stomach. I hesitated for a second, and he immediately got up and ran toward a bus, smashing a window to climb inside. Fighting back waves of nausea, I followed him onto the bus. I fumbled through the darkness, when suddenly a powerful force hit me from behind. I could have dodged it, but my stomach inexplicably hurt. As I tried to evade, someone pinned me to a seat. Edward, I called out. Without hesitation, he tied my hands with his necktie. My stomach was feeling uncomfortable. In the chaos of the night, I looked at him. For many years afterward, I would remember that look in his eyes, like an abandoned dog that knows it's about to be poisoned. He took my cell phone from my pocket, dialed my colleague's number, tossed it beside me, then kicked open the bus window, and disappeared into the vast darkness. Edward was gone, and the captain had vanished too. The precinct was in complete chaos. The higher-ups were taking this very seriously. Someone untied me. I ran to a streetlight and threw up. I felt my pocket and smiled bitterly. Edward had also taken my service weapon. When it rains, it pours. Colleagues from different departments were called in for emergency meetings. The situation had escalated. Not only because the target was a recently detained suspect, but because the captain had been taken hostage by Edward just an hour and 20 minutes ago. Drone footage showed an abandoned factory rooftop. Edward was covered in blood, barely able to walk, holding my gun to the captain's head. I rushed to the scene with the police cars. Neon lights blurred together. I had never seen such heavy rain, as if trying to wash away the blood and bury all secrets. Suspect Edward, put down your weapon and surrender immediately. You are surrounded. I repeat, you are surrounded. Police cars encircled the factory while the announcement played on repeat. The commissioner handed me the microphone and took me upstairs. Edward won't see anyone right now. We're not sure if he'll even talk to you. Try to stall as long as possible while our snipers find an angle. I took the microphone. The helicopter searchlight illuminated the entire rooftop like daylight. Raindrops refracted the light into countless shards, broken yet aggressive. Edward. The moment I called his name, he jerked his head up. I didn't want to look into his eyes. He was like a child who had just regained his memory, like someone who had been tortured countless times, but was still watching me from hell. I'm a police officer, he said, pressing the gun against the captain's head. His voice was hoarse. Tell them I'm a cop. Only you know. Tell them. He trembled uncontrollably as rain pounded around him. Edward hadn't taken his medication for days. His mental state was extremely unstable. He looked like a complete madman, or a child denied candy, desperately trying to prove something to others, prove a meaningless title. But the rain drowned out all sound, leaving him with nothing but deafening silence. Baby, there's no going back for me, is there? Raindrops hung on his eyelashes as he looked at me with reddened eyes. Perhaps I should have known that day. He had torn everything apart with no intention of putting it back together. Still, I raised the microphone and said, Edward, put down the gun. It's not over. We can start again. How? He asked with a laugh. Who would believe me? Look, my hands are already soaked in too much blood. Who the fuck knows what I've done? He caused all this. Can't I kill him? Why can't I kill him? I'm in so much pain. I want revenge for myself. I just want revenge for myself. The rain muffled the helicopter noise as I said. But if you do this, how are you any different from the criminals you fought so hard against? Wouldn't you be betraying the uniform you once wore? Look at yourself now. Wouldn't that officer who once had light in his heart despise who you've become? The rain poured down mercilessly. The man stared at me stunned. He lowered his hand, and everyone let out a sigh of relief. The helicopter searchlight rotated. He pushed the captain away, sending a chill down my spine. He said, Baby, you said you'd never leave me. That blinding light expanded infinitely in my pupils as he raised the gun to his own temple. He smiled at me. Baby, you said you'd never lie to me. Baby, you said you'd never betray me. Baby, you said you'd never leave me. You haven't kept a single one of those promises. Edward actually had a good, honest face. As the spotlight shone on him, for a moment his obsessive, crazed eyes cleared. I seemed to see a rookie cop who once had hopes for the future. He smiled at me, then trembled. He understood everything. He had regained clarity, but too late. I no longer deserve to be a police officer, do I? A gunshot rang out, as if shattering a white dream. Edward. I rushed toward him, only to find blood splattered everywhere. You see, Mary Jones, his head exploded right in front of you. He pulled the trigger himself. He's dead as can be, with blood all over you. A small toy fell from his pocket. The communication device I disguised as a robot, my birthday gift to him. The little robot fell onto the concrete, finally breaking an arm, staring at me with dull gray eyes. Epilogue. I woke up from my dream with a start. The bus was speeding down the highway, passing fields of blooming canola flowers. Mom, you had a nightmare, didn't you? Don't have bad dreams. I'm here. I'll protect you. The boy hugged my arm. I reached out and patted his head. After that incident, the authorities launched a thorough investigation. The captain was sentenced to death on more than a dozen charges, including espionage and endangering public security. During interrogation, he refused to acknowledge Edward's former identity as a police officer, saying Edward would never make it onto the Wall of Honor. I resigned from the police force. I suffer from severe PTSD and couldn't continue working there. After giving birth to Jamie, I've been living with him in a small town in southern Italy. Thankfully, Jamie is sensible, making life as a single mother less chaotic. He's a good student and smart like his father. I just hope he doesn't grow up to be a romantic fool like his dad. I took Jamie to a village and showed an elderly 80-year-old woman at the entrance a photo. She exclaimed, "Oh, that's Vico. How is he doing now?" "Vico? What's his full name?" "Vico Zanetti." So that was his real name. Following the old woman's directions, I pushed open the door to a house in the corner of the town. A tiny home where Vico had lived as a left-behind child for the first half of his life. It was a strange feeling, like traveling through time. The old TV still had its floral cover. No one had visited for nearly 10 years. Through the floating dust, I surveyed everything, suddenly noticing a few newer traces. I quickly walked to a wooden box prominently displayed on the table. I tried the password. It was my birthday. Music from a music box gently played. His desperate romance made me want to cry. He must have snuck in during his time on the run. Inside was a letter. I never knew his handwriting was so beautiful. He had previously always written with his left hand. "Baby, if you're reading this letter, you must be looking for me. I'm writing these words during a moment of clarity. I want to tell you not to worry. Whatever the final outcome, it's the decision I wanted to make." I stared at the yellowed paper, my shoulders trembling uncontrollably as I read. "Mom, don't cry." Jamie held my finger. I suddenly hugged him tight. He tilted his head and stroked my hair, comforting me. There. I'll turn into a little lamb for you. Then Mom won't cry, okay?" His eyes are what remind me most of his father. For a moment, I felt like the man was crouching beside me too. The last 2 sentences in his letter were, "Baby, if possible, please send me a moon from tomorrow night. A wild dog needs no tombstone. Just let it run wild until it rots."